speaks to how I feel about this. I'm very excited when I get emails. For example, one I got today showing Jimmy Fallon doing his barbershop routine to Shaggy's It Wasn't Me. Absolutely hilarious. And like Brother Carlyle, who is a musician first, always says to me, you know, if you have a song that is well built, that is structured, right, and properly, then it can be adapted. Yeah. And so when they did that, that brought joy. But then I was also sent an email by Uwe Banter in Germany, who was here at the last Culture Salute, showing me the Swedish chamber. Okay, let me get it right. It was a Swedish choir. Yeah. Who was right? Somebody saw it, right? Yeah. And this is their men's choir. Wholly paying reverence and tribute to Rastafari and Nyabinghi up inside their church. Are you hearing me? Wow. And to see how they treated By the Rivers of Babylon, a song that is very near and dear to Andy. The melodians, of course, from the soundtrack of The Harder They Come. The way they treated, was it Nothing Never Get Weary? But, no, right? I mean, No Night in Zion. When you see the way that this was treated, I said to myself, now, if young boys and girls in Jamaica was taught to have a reverence and a respect for this music, they would hold it in as high a regard as they hold Beethoven, Mozart, and all those others that we had to learn. I had to learn them in school. I did music. You went to school in Jamaica, you had to do music. We all did music in school. We never learned anything about reggae though, because that was dirty Rasta music. Let's keep it real. Okay? So I said that I'm encouraged by what I see going on around the world. What I am dismayed and cautionary about is what is happening on the island of Jamaica. What is happening there has to change. There has to be, and that psyche is then transported out into wherever we are, into the Brooklyns, the New Yorks, the Torontos, the Miamis of the world. Because that same attitude, because we're transient people, right? And we're on emails and we're on phone. And so when people say something like, reggae is dead, I always ask them, who said that? Where did that come from? Because I'm out there, I still can't figure out where that came from, because that's a myth, right? But we have got to get that psyche rewired so we understand that reggae is to be appreciated. When I look around this room and I see my Caucasian brothers and sisters, how did they come to reggae? They didn't come to reggae because they had nothing else to do. They came to reggae because reggae pulled them into it. Because it is a oneness music. Right? Speak to Toots. Speak to, I'm trying to name some of the people.
Burning Spear.
Burning Spear. Give me some of the guys. Steve Post. People who are just steady on the road. They will tell you, okay, that they will play arenas where no one in the audience speaks a word of English. Andy Basler is here. He'll share these stories. However, they will sing word for word for these songs. So what is it about this song? Right. This song, this music. So that psyche has to be addressed. And how do we do that? By starting with the young ones. China Nicole is a teacher. She knows how important it is how to educate and teach values to our youngsters. And that is where I'm at. That's my take on the whole thing.
If you listen to Sharon, you would probably think that all is well in the reggae arena. And yet still, and Herz says, if you know your history, then you know where you're coming from. He goes on further to say that the past of Jamaica parallels the past of reggae music. Imperialists extract wealth, music labels steal from artists. The future may bring change, and he says, At the urging of long-aggrieved artists, pressure has begun to drop on the labels. When that pressure drops, the down pressers are going to feel it. And they will know that they were doing wrong. When they are brought to justice, or cut a deal to save face, much stolen music and money may finally be returned to long-cheated artists and families. No, Andy, that's a whole other stuff here.
I don't have that many great things to say, so I like to lean on the artists because I feel like all of the inspiration comes from them. So one good thing about music, when it hits, you feel no pain. And that is true, unless you're intellectual property, The music industry, let's face it, before we start talking about any specifics, the music industry as a whole, from day one to the end of time, has been nothing but exploitation.
Yes.
You really couldn't say anything much better about any other label than you can say about, the various Jamaican labels. The truth is that the industry is set up for those who have money or lawyers or both to exploit artists, color, younger, lesser privileged, etc., to take from their talent, to give them as little as possible, to not explain to them exactly how they're being paid, why they're being paid, when they're being paid, what those fees are that are being deducted, or anything else. And then to make as many people in suits, usually lawyers, rich, while the artists get by, unless they happen to be one of the top 20 artists in the world, in which case they can be rich. It's not really a great model. It never has been. And as an intellectual property attorney, there are moments when I listen to Bob and I'm unable to tap into the unconditional love that Ross Sajafu has so aptly urged in person and online. I'm frequently reminded of that scene in Do the Right Thing, my favorite movie, and the most important movie, really, I think, in which Radio Raheem struggles with the left and the right hand. And when I think about the music industry, I find myself trying to focus on the love, and when it hits, we feel no pain, but sometimes I feel a certain amount of hate. And I think it's time for things to change.
That's real.
There are almost no good ideas left among the major labels. If you know the history of this music industry, it is unmitigated failure across the board for the last 20 years. They were presented with an opportunity in the 90s to negotiate with Napster and set up iTunes themselves. Instead, they thought, well, let's sue Napster as long as we can. Let's sue everybody who does anything online as long as we can. Now, who made that decision? It was lawyers, the recording industry of America. Now, I won't go into the whole rant about what it is to be a self-loathing attorney and reggae lover. But if you really tap into the music industry, the people who have done it the most disservice are almost all lawyers. There are some pretty wonderful producers out there who we all know, but really, if you're going to choose one group, it's the lawyers. I think there's a way to change this, to start to change this. Trenchtown Rock is a very important song. Most of Bob's songs are very important songs, let's face it. There's a Ninth Circuit decision that came out in September last year called Rock River Communications versus Universal Music Group. It's a case worth studying if you are a producer or an artist. In that case, a small label, Rock River, sought to do a sampling remix album around some early Bob songs, including Trenchtown Rock, Light It Up Yourself, and a bunch of others that were recorded as, let's face it, most of the things that weren't recorded by Beverly or maybe Leslie Kahn under pretty shady circumstances, and at least not a whole lot of paperwork. Universal Music, in its well-lawyered up way, went hard at Rock River and tried to stop them from releasing this album, and they argued to the Ninth Circuit that it would be impossible for this poor little label to lose profits on the album they had wanted to do because it would have been illegal for Rock River to use these tracks because Universal Music passed on from whoever, one of those labels that we all know, owned those and hadn't given them the rights. The Ninth Circuit, which is the most important entertainment circuit, the Supreme Court does not care about Hollywood or the music industry except in the rarest cases. So the Ninth Circuit is almost the last word. The Ninth Circuit turned around to Universal and said, hold on a minute, Universal, do you have the right to use those? Can you show chain of title to those tracks? Study that case. I believe, and there are plenty of other people who have worked at these labels who know that that same story could be told over and over again about a lot of tracks that were recorded, let's say, before and or around the time that things got a little hot in the 70s. That's one thing. Another thing is that there are a lot of lawyers out there, lawyers, paralegals, other folks who also love reggae music, who love Jamaica, who want nothing but the best for this island that has given so much. I mean, if you really thought about per capita, what country has contributed the most to the happiness quotient of the world, no disrespect, every country is spectacular, but really, you know, how much music have you got out there? I mean, New Orleans maybe per capita has. That'd be the only other place. There are quite a number of folks who would like to help change this. And we intend in the US, in Jamaica, in the UK, in France, in Germany, to continue conversations with some of these labels, to bring to the labels specific claims by specific artists. Essentially, I believe the Venn diagram would be, if you've ever recorded for any of these labels, you almost certainly, there's nothing, that's not an omen. If you have ever recorded with one of these labels, you almost certainly have a claim against them. And you may have already pursued them too. We are going to gather together all these claims in a nice lawyerly way, and then we're going to present them as much en masse as possible. And we hope, with the help of a lot of friends, hopefully including CPR, who we've reached out to get somebody to cut a deal, a nice deal where they try to pretend that they actually care about their artists and they do something forward-looking. Some amount of money is finally paid to the artists and their families for the royalties that have been mistakenly failed to be paid because they were unable to determine which family member controls the estate.
Don Harper says that, and I'm not going to read all of it, it's an extremely long statement, but it says that reggae as a global popular music genre is inextricably linked to the nation of a brand Jamaica. This will explain why much of the discussion surrounding the future state and development of Jamaica's music industry tends to build on the argument that any such development has the potential to bring economic benefits to the nation. I'm going to jump to the end where he says that at the moment, I'm not so much concerned about the future of reggae as a global music brand. What seems to me as more problematic is our failure to recognize that we do not need government-sanctioned initiatives to create a set of conditions to ensure that Jamaicans remain relevant in the future. After all, we should see reggae as an example of what is possible when we show that we've got a mind of our own. Okay, Don Harper, out of London.
Greetings, Don.
Please share with the audience.
Hey, Sharon.
Hey.
Please share with the audience your thoughts on this issue of the future of reggae music.
I've been involved in the music industry for 20 plus years. I've now dedicated a couple of years to really digging a bit deeper to find out exactly why we're still having this conversation. The fact that we're actually at this meeting is part of the reason I'm doing a research project, because I'm curious about why we're still asking these types of questions when it appears to most of us to be obvious. Right? Interestingly enough, though, the last few years has seen kind of a corporate rock again on the music, primarily because various international organizations over the last decade or so keep repeating that creative industry contribute to economic development. And we would have hoped that the government, in a sense, has tried to listen to that. And they claim that they have been, quite frankly. My concern, though, is, when I go back 10, 15, 20 years, this thing has been studied to death. So the documentation is obviously there, to support the fact that something can come out of the reggae industry, right? At least for Jamaica from an economic standpoint. But being a practitioner in the field for a long time, I have a bigger concern, and that is, there is some benefit that can come to the music, yes. But what kind of infrastructure has been behind it? In the last several years or several decades, obviously we've seen some of the major labels jump in and support these artists, and as your colleagues just mentioned, that's also been a problem. But, again, for this music to develop and for this music to have a future, in my view, there has to be some kind of infrastructure. And I'm concerned that a lot of folks keep turning to the government and keep screaming to the government to help. And I don't see anything happening. So I think that maybe what we need to do is stop doing that, at least for the moment, and try to create a vision for ourselves. Because I haven't seen a vision, I haven't heard of a vision. We keep talking the future of reggae, but I don't know what that future is. We keep talking about development, I don't know what that development is or what we're developing towards. And what I'd like to do, with the time I have left here on this earth, is to try to contribute to creating a vision, to creating something concrete, to be part of an action-oriented team, to make sure that, at least, what's the saying, if we can shoot for the moon, at least we'll reach the stars or something like that. But I'd like to be part of that. And so I think that before we can even approach the government, to close my brief argument here, is that we have to definitely sit down together, the folks who are interested, the folks who claim that they love music, to say, what is it exactly that we're trying to accomplish? What do we want an industry, or Jamaican industry, because I don't think we have one yet, what do we want that to look like? And if we can begin to formulate that plan, then I think at least maybe now we can figure out who we need to step to, how we want our artists to perform, how we want our artists to act, and these types of things. And so hopefully that makes sense to you. But that's where I am at the moment.
Okay, thanks for that, Don.